Hi everyone, it's MJ, and I'm going to be wearing a hat because we're in lockdown and I forgot to go to the hairdresser. So my hair's an absolute mess. So we're wearing a hat for this video. That's why am I wearing a hat in the evening? Like I said, lockdown, forgot to go to the hairdresser. Anyway, what I want to talk about in this video is quite a philosophical question, but more on a scientific terms. And it's this idea that does the existence of God depend on evidence? This is a very common argument that atheists like to put forward. They say God isn't real or God doesn't exist because there's no evidence for him. And it's always interesting to maybe question by, well, what exactly do you mean by evidence? Because there is evidence that God exists, and that the reality of God is a fact. Of course, they don't like that type of evidence. We're going to talk about it. Instead, we'll see that they rather have a higher standard, let's maybe call it that. But if we were to look at, say, the court of law, so fortunately my dad was a lawyer, so I kind of grew up knowing a little bit about the legal system. And in the legal system, something that you can submit as evidence is a witness. And what a witness does is they sit in the box and they then provide a testament of what they saw happen, and this is used as evidence in order for the judge to come up with a verdict on what the penalty or what how should justice be served. So the court systems that we live in use testaments as a form of evidence. And if we look at what the Bible is literally, what is the Bible? It's literally a library of books divided into two main sections, the Old Testament and the New Testament. So the Bible literally is a book of evidence. And that's, it's interesting because this is where I think a lot of Christians get a lot of their foundational faith and their beliefs is from this Bible, and it's quite rightly so, because this is a book of testaments. It is evidence as far as a legal perspective goes. Of course, atheists don't tend to be lawyers. They tend more to be your scientists, your biologists, and for them, they see evidence as something a little bit different. They want the empirical evidence, and this whole idea is that we know gravity is a thing because I can set up an experiment, and every time I drop something and I repeat the experiment over and over again, the same outcome is going to be manifested, and therefore this is evidence. And it's interesting because this is the evidence that they're demanding that the Christians somehow manifest in order to prove their statement that the reality of God is true and not a fiction, not a friction. It is interesting though, because from an atheist point of view, I find it a little bit hypocritical, which is funny because Christians normally get called hypocritical, and we tend to be. I mean, Christians are sometimes the worst marketing. We've got like the best product, but the worst marketing team because of this hypocrisy. I know Nietzsche once even said in his book, he said it's not going to be the arguments of atheism that's going to be the downfall of Christianity, but rather the hypocrisy of its followers. Of course, Nietzsche was wrong. Christianity is still alive and well. But anyway, getting a little bit sidetracked there. Coming back to the atheists, why I say that they're a little bit hypocritical with their demands for evidence is because if you look at what is the evidence the majority of us use in order to set our beliefs. News, accounts, what's happening in the world, a lot of the information we receive on social media, all of these things are testaments that have been provided by other people. Think, you read a news article, you're reading a testament that, a journalist has gone out, they've asked some people who were at the event what's happened, they've reconstructed this narrative that you're then reading and you're believing in it, not because you actually went there and did an empirical investigation and actually validated every single observation that they made. No, instead, you're taking their word for it. There's, humans have this idea of trust. We trust one another. You look at the entire financial system. The entire financial system is built on trust and confidence. Why is money a store of value? Because we believe that other people will accept it as having value. A lot of this stuff, faith, there's faith in the money system, faith in a lot of these things, and we base a lot of our beliefs on testaments. So it's very interesting that atheists kind of like, no, you can't, the most common piece of evidence that we use in order to, build our basic beliefs on, you can't use that for God. We don't want, even though we use that to believe things every day, we don't want that. Instead, there's this insistence on this empirical evidence, and it's always interesting when I ask an atheist, what evidence do you actually want to happen? Like, do you want something spectacular to happen? Like, I don't know, the sea to be parted, or for plagues to take over a totalitarian government? Because according to the witnesses, that stuff did actually happen. But it's interesting. Like, it's almost as if they want to take God and make it like a science experiment. Like, every time I pray, the Bible must levitate. Okay, let's say this is this weird experiment that they make. But now let's entertain this idea. Let's say the atheists create this experiment. They say, we will believe in God if every time we pray, the Bible levitates. And let's say, without a doubt, every single time they pray, the Bible starts levitating. What the atheist is then going to say, he's going to say, well, you know what, this God is not all-powerful, doesn't fit the God definition of being the absolute, because he obeys me. Because look, whenever I pray, the Bible is gonna levitate. I control him. If the Bible suddenly stops levitating, then look, empirical evidence, God doesn't exist. It's a very clever game that they can take this requirement, and if God ever fulfills this requirement, they can turn it on its head and say, nope, sorry, you're not a God. Also, the whole idea that God feels the need to get their approval, or has this identity issue that he needs to justify himself to other people. If he had that hang up, then again that would go against the definition of God as being this all-powerful absolute being. The fact that he has to try and fill the doubts of these other individuals. So what I'm getting at is that empirical evidence for God would actually be proof against his existence, against his all-powerfulness and his magnificence, rather than proof for his existence. And that's why the atheists have kind of set up a very clever trick. It's that idea where, they go to Jesus and they're like, should we pay taxes? And they know if Jesus says, yes, pay taxes, and they can be like, oh, look, he's just a puppet of the state. And if Jesus says, don't pay taxes, they can be to the state, oh, look, this is an anarchist, he's trying to cause terror, and he's going against the state. So it's these aren't new. We see in the Testaments that atheists have been trying to trick God, or set up these sticky situations where no matter which answer you kind of give, you kind of fall prey. Of course, this is the lovely thing about God, is how he's able to transcend it. So with the tax question, Jesus very well says, well, whose image is on the coin? And they say, well, Caesar's image is on the coin. And he says, well, give to God which is God, and give to Caesar that which is Caesar's. And what would have been interesting is if it was a genuine question, they might have come forward and they said, well, what should we give to God? And some commentators, now this is going a little bit extrapolating on the Bible, but some commentators have said that if Jesus was asked this question, he might have said something like, well, whose image is on you? Which would have been a lovely reference back to the Genesis story, where we told that we are made in the image of God. Anyway, that's maybe going a little bit off topic, or something that we can maybe discuss in another video, in another time. But what I wanted to do in this video was just show that we don't necessarily need empirical evidence to justify the reality of God, because on the one hand, we do have enough evidence in the form of a testament to have a logical belief in God, and the empirical evidence set forward by an atheist, or whatever experiment they want to construct, might therefore go against the existence of God, as it will show him either to be a slave of humanity or someone who needs to justify his existence because of some identity hang-up. Of course, these are just my thoughts. Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I welcome everyone. If you're an atheist, if you're a troll, or if you genuinely want to ask me something, please let me know your thoughts down below. I'm going to do my best to interact with you. So if it's an insult, throw it down there. Let's chat about it. If it's a genuine question, I'll try my best to answer it. But thank you so much for watching, and keep well. And I hope everyone's staying safe during this corona lockdown. As you can see, the hair, I really need to go find a hairdresser once this lockdown is lifted. But yeah, stay safe, everyone. Cheers.